I call Denise Roach.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to take a call on the Passport Amendment Bill number 2 for the Greens, which the Green Party fully intends to support this bill. I'd like to start my speech by looking at the genesis of this bill, where this policy change came from. And I did this in my first reading too, but I think it's worth mentioning. A gentleman called Kyle Lockwood set up a petition because he saw an upset mother with her son at Melbourne Airport who couldn't fly because the mother's 5-year passport had less than 6 months of validity left. And I think that's reasonable. It's great that this triggered a petition, which was then picked up by the Minister and became this bill. Since then, sir, the proposal has, of course, gone and passed through the Select Committee process, ably chaired by Ruth Dyson. And I'd also like to thank the other members of the Select Committee. I'm not a permanent member. I was filling in for my colleague Mojo Mathers. But I'd also just like to acknowledge the work of Sarah Dowie, Brett Hudson, Mark Mitchell and Adrian Ruffet. I think I waxed lyrical in my first reading of this bill about the democratic process and how this bill was a shining example of that. And I'd like to wax lyrical again about how important the Select Committee process is and how it's an opportunity for parliamentary colleagues to work cooperatively to improve legislation and also for the public to feed in. And I think this example of working together on this bill and examining the 20 public submissions that we've fed into the process, and they were all universally in favour of extending passports to a 10-year period. I think this will be one of my treasured memories of cross-party cooperation for many years to come. And I wish we had more opportunities to work cooperatively like this. We tried to reach across the aisle to work with the government to introduce necessary changes in the Health and Safety Reform Bill in the last sitting session. Unfortunately, the government chose not to work with us and came out with a universally derided bill which political scientist Bryce Edwards has included in his list of most damaging incidents for this government in his article on the 6th of September. The point is, sir, that everyone profits when the government brings the voices of the Greens to the table. You get things like insulation campaigns, bike lanes, and now our support on a very sensible bill. And the reasons that we supported this bill in the first reading remain now. Basically, this change will save New Zealanders the hassles and stress and money from applying for a new passport, and it will bring New Zealand into line with our neighbours and friends across the world and other countries. And I did have some initial concerns, I think, about the security aspects. However, through the Select Committee process and the information we received from the officials, who I have to say were great, I feel that they have been addressed adequately. However, in my first speech, I did also raise other concerns, which was about the underfunding of critical public services, and that remains relevant. And an example, I guess, is that this morning there was that shocking expose in the New Zealand Herald about Masala, a chain of restaurants that had been exploiting migrant workers. And some of these cases were things like a chef who was paid just $40 for 2 months' work, and a waiter who was working 66 hours a week for $2.64. So I applaud the heroic work of our labour inspectors, but we have to recognise that they're underfunded and overworked, as are many of our other core public services. And rather than wasting money trying to plug the gaps in the public sector by giving contracts and shifting our responsibilities off to inefficient, incompetent and discredited providers like Serco, shouldn't we be investing our money into our core public services? As I mentioned the last time, The fact that the department was saying that this minor change could lead to revenue problems was alarming. And it's symptomatic of the strains that our hard-working public services have been put under. Essential services like this one's here. Mr. Speaker, we support the modernisations of Passports Act 1992. We support the provisions for electronic processing, and we recognise that this will save New Zealanders time and money in renewing travel documents, and this is something we support. I have to say it's a very efficient process right now. Having renewed my passport just a month ago, it took a day to get my passport back to me. One day, it was amazing. Finally, I'd like to conclude by stating what a privilege this process has been, and how I'd just like to stress that it could serve as an example of cross-party consensus. It was only a small change, this bill, but it's hopeful and it's a helpful template of parties working together to address common challenges. And we could be working on a lot more things together, crucial things like the refugee quota, like climate change, for example, and we would welcome the opportunity to work with all parties on that. So, Sir, this bill could show us how to do it, how to work cooperatively. We commend it to the House.